Welcome, everybody. It's time for us to talk about a second version of modern ethics after utilitarianism, and we call this Kantianism. It's actually named after a philosopher, Immanuel Kant. So the situation is the same as it was for early utilitarianism. It's the 18th century. It's the time of a social and intellectual and political revolutions and a philosophical revolution where philosophers are consciously and self-consciously saying, what can reason teach? And as we saw, the utilitarian said that in ethics, that means the rule of utility, always seek the most util thing. So here's Kant at the same time, and we'll discover that he thinks utilitarianism is dead wrong, but he's asking the same question. What does reason teach? So we're not going back to divine command theory. We're not going back to theory of natural law. We're looking for a modern theory which appeals to reason. Immanuel Kant was born in 1724 and lived to 1804. He lived his entire life in and around one town, what's called Kaliningrad now. It's called Königsberg during his lifetime. It was part of the Kingdom of Prussia, and after his lifetime, Prussia became part of what we call Germany. Because of the accidents of European history, Kaliningrad, the town where he was born and lived, is now part of Russia. And here's a little aside. If you look at the map of Europe, there is a little bit of Russia that is kind of off. It's separated from the rest of Russia by part of Poland. So when Dr. Garcia and I took a juniors abroad class in 2019 to Russia, and we wanted to go from St. Petersburg all the way around to Copenhagen, and we thought, we'll go through Kaliningrad. Well, that meant going into Russia, leaving Russia, and entering Russia again. And the Russians have entry visa fees. And we were discouraged, and so the upshot is we never got to go to Kaliningrad in 2019. It's a sad story. Anyway, back to Immanuel Kant. He was born to a pietist Lutheran family, and he lived his whole life in Königsberg, or Kaliningrad nowadays. When it comes to ethics, Kant says that we need to recognize the difference between two kinds of imperatives. An imperative, of course, says, do this. Well, the first kind of imperative is the hypothetical imperative. It says, if you want something, do this. So the case that I give is if you really love God, if you want to please God, then love your neighbor. A categorical imperative, on the other hand, leaves out the if. It just says, do it. Love your neighbor. The Nike Corporation with their theme of just do it, are unconsciously, I'm sure, borrowing from Kant. Kant says that there are such things as categorical imperatives that are driven by reason alone. So another way to put it then is to remake it as a hypothetical imperative, and the hypothetical imperative would be, if you are a rational being with any self-respect at all, then do it. Well, how does that work? He gives three versions of the categorical imperative. The first one is act only according to that maxim, which you can at the same time will that it be a universal law. So we need to unpack that a little bit. First, he talks about a maxim. A maxim is the rule you will be following if you do a certain thing, all right? The second part is that you need to ask, can you will it be a universal law? A universal law is a law of nature. It's kind of like the law of sunflowers. Sunflowers face the sun. It's an interesting thing about sunflowers. They're heliotropic, right? So in the morning, sunflowers face east. But by afternoon, they're facing west. Do the sunflowers decide to do this? Of course not. They are following a law of nature. A law of nature. The water runs downhill. It doesn't run uphill. So when Kant says, when you're testing your maxim, can you will that it be a universal law, that everybody else will do it automatically. Not that they can do it, but they will do it. And it is a matter not of desire, but possibility. Is it possible to will that everybody will do this? Now, sometimes parents, without ever reading Kant, I'm sure they never did, invent a version of Kantianism. They say, honey, what would you think if all the people did that? Or as my father said, if everybody else is jumping off the bridge, would you do it? That's kind of backwards. The basic idea here, Kant says, is that morality is founded in consistency. Consistent moral agents will follow the categorical imperative. Now, helpfully, he gives a couple of examples. His first example is borrowing money. Suppose there is a man who needs to borrow money because he has some need. His children are hungry, let's say. He knows that if he goes to the bank and tries to borrow money, they're going to ask him if he can pay it back. He knows he can't pay it back. He's going to spend the borrowed money on food. They're going to eat it up. It'll be gone. He can't pay it back. But he's clever. And he knows the banker is kind of stupid. He thinks, I could lie on my loan application. And I could get away with it. Now, Kant says, suppose he's right. Suppose he could get away with it. Does that mean it's right and proper? No. He has to ask, is it possible to universalize what I am doing? What would the world be like if everybody automatically lied on their loan applications when they go to the bank? Well, put yourself in the place of the banker. How much money are you going to spend on loan applications? Every one of them is falsified. You're not going to have any loan. You won't give loans, and you won't even have loan applications. And here's the point, Kant says. It is impossible to will that everybody act as you are thinking that you're going to act. Even if we assume that you could get away with it, you're very clever and you can deceive the banker. So you begin to see how he thinks the categorical imperative weighs in on us. You have to tell the truth. That's Kant's own first example. And it goes a long way toward persuading some of us. His second example goes a long way toward giving some of us pause. It's the case of the inquiring murderer. Suppose one of your friends comes running into your apartment and says, "Hide me quick!" And you go, "What? Huh?" Before you have any chance to say anything, your friend slips behind the door into the bathroom and shuts the door. You're still turning around wondering what's going on when another person, an acquaintance, we'll say, of both you and your friend, shows up and he's got a gun. And in your fright, the gun looks like the barrel is this big and he's pointing it at you. And he says, "Where's so-and-so? I'm going to kill him." Here is a person who says, and you have good reason to believe, that he is an inquiring murderer. He wants to kill the person who just went into your closet or bathroom or wherever it is. What should you do? Many of us are tempted to say, you should lie. You should say, "I think I saw him running down the street. Go get him." So while the inquiring murderer is running down the street, you can call the police and save the guy's life. That's what we think. Kant says, can you will that people lie to each other? Can you make that a universal law? Obviously not. If everybody lied all the time, we would just grunt at each other. We wouldn't have. The purpose of language is truthful communication. So Kant said, he lays down the law here, and we'll talk about this more in the next lecture. Kant believes in the moral law. You got to hear those capital letters, moral law. He says you have to do your duty. You have to tell the truth. You say, well, I think he's hiding in my bathroom. But by the way, murder is wrong. You should not shoot him. In fact, I will stand in front of the bathroom. You'll have to kill us both, but I cannot lie to you. He is in the bathroom. Now, most of us would say, well, something has gone wrong. And we wouldn't give Kant any more time. We'll talk about that more at the next lecture.